Hi everyone, my name is Lily and welcome to the first episode of Warwick International Development Society's Career Profiles. In this series, we'll be talking to individuals working across the development sector and sharing in their knowledge, wise words of advice and top tips for how to be most successful when looking for a career in the industry. Today, I'm joined by Demiladé, a successful development career woman currently working at the Department for International Trade with past experience at the UN, the Department for International Development, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and more. In addition, she has recently founded the Women in International Affairs Network, a digital platform connecting people with resources, advice, and up-to-date information about opportunities available in international affairs. So thank you for joining me today, Demi.
No problem.
I think it's probably best to start with one of the most interesting questions about the industry, which is what inspired you to kind of work in the field of development?
So I think it was a number of things. I don't think it was any one thing. I think it was a couple of things. I think it was going to university with all of this passion for kind of social issues, and I decided to study law, but very quickly decided that the corporate law route wasn't for me. So I think it was really an expression of the things that I was naturally interested in, but through my university degree, it kind of shifted me towards the development route rather than going into corporate law. I've also always really been passionate about, especially as someone of kind of African descent and African heritage, and knowing the issues that, not just my own like immediate family, but kind of people in my country. I'm Nigerian, and my parents are both from Nigeria and came to the UK, I think back in the 80s. So knowing, the hardships that people are facing over there, I think there was kind of a natural affinity to some of the issues that people in what some people call the third world, some people call the developing world, a kind of affinity to those issues. So I think it was a myriad of things, but it really all kind of came to a head when I studied my law degree, and it just became very clear to me that corporate law is not for me. I'm more interested in something that would feel meaningful, where I can help people. And I kind of stumbled across international development by accident. So I decided to do a master's. It was still a law master's. It was in international development, law and human rights. But through that master's degree, I was really opened up to the issues and the international development sector. And I think that's how I was then able to articulate what it was that I really wanted to do. But yeah, it was definitely a journey and not something that I figured out straight away. So I guess that would be a key takeaway, in that you might start university or a master's or even your first job thinking you know what you want to do, but actually you might end up doing something completely different that you enjoy way more. So it's always good to get different experiences and try new things.
Would you recommend, in terms of kind of experience and things like that, would you recommend maybe some kind of volunteering experience, or is a master's kind of necessary, do you think, to get?
Definitely. So I think experience is, in my opinion, probably a better teacher than the qualification, just because you get the actual day-to-day, kind of feet on the ground, what it's actually like doing a particular role or working in a particular sector. That being said, I think there's still definitely value in pursuing any type of postgraduate degree or even your undergraduate degree. I don't really think that I don't think it should put you off. And I definitely think if you're really interested in something, especially for someone like me that I studied, law is quite a vocational career, and I knew that I wasn't interested in that. So I kind of had to find something else that was a bit more closely aligned to what I was interested in. But in my experience now, working for a couple of years, I definitely think that getting the real experience and just trying it out is a much better teacher. You learn a lot more. You learn a bit quicker as well. It's a lot quicker to learn on the job than it is in a classroom or a lecture theatre. But then, some people want to go into academia. So, it really just depends. But I think definitely do, some volunteering, do some internships. And that's one of the great things about being at uni, is that there will be internships that, when you apply for them, they're not expecting you to have all the experience in the world. And just as much as you want to get the experience, they also want to have the benefit of having, young people who are really interested in particular things to really come in and support, especially if you're looking at the kind of charity sector sector, or kind of small NGOs where you know a lot of funding isn't available to them. So it's a two-way thing. It's something that I always say to my mentees, that as much as you know, when you go for an interview, they're interviewing you for a role, you're also interviewing them to see if, you know, it's the right fit for you, if you feel like you would flourish in that type of organization or team. So it's definitely good to frame it as a two-way thing.
And in relation to kind of the industry itself, there's kind of been a little bit of kind of chatter about how it's a lot harder these days to kind of get more field experience because NGO in Malawi, there's kind of a trend more to hire Malawians to work in the NGO because obviously generally you're in the country, you know the country a lot better than somebody maybe who's been educated in Britain and they know less about the actual inner workings of the country itself. How would you recommend is the best way to kind of get that field experience, so then if you do end up in a job in Britain, for example, that you still do what you're talking about?
Yeah, so I think it would be to start small and to be realistic. And I think, you know, there's a broader conversation around, so I'm not sure if you've kind of read articles around volunteerism and, you know, the idea of, you know, privileged people from the West or from the global North or whatever you call it, going to these kind of more underdeveloped countries, getting a lot of these opportunities, but not necessarily having the real skills to be able to do the real work. So I think it's always a good thing when you see, for example, the Malawian organization you were speaking or referring to, it's always good to see those opportunities being afforded to people that really live there and kind of understand how things really work.
Yeah.
So I would say it's, you know, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I would say it's good to kind of look at your current ecosystem and where you are in your environment and try and find and make opportunities for yourself. So one of the things that I did when I was doing my master's was that I volunteered at a local refugee and migrant center, and it was honestly one of the best things that I could have done, because not only was it, and this was all kind of external to my university course, so this was something that I just applied for, kind of looking for what sorts of opportunities there were in the local area. So in where I was living in that local area, there were a lot of kind of women's shelters, refugee and migrant centres, legal clinics that offered free pro bono advice because there was a very big asylum and migrant community there. So kind of trying to capitalize off of, not capitalize off of, but make the opportunities where they might not feel as obvious. So your first internship might not be at the United Nations or a big charity like Oxfam. It might be at a local refugee centre. It might be at your local law clinic. It might be, you know, volunteering for a children's centre, you know, things like that, where you might not necessarily be working on a huge pressing international development issue, but you will be working on some kind of social development, social inclusion issue, and you get that experience of working. And I always say that, you know, a lot of people in the development sector or people pursuing a career in the development sector have heaps of passion for the issues, but it's not the passion that's going to enable you to be able to do the work. It's the transferable skills. So, you know, knowing how to, you know, draft an email to an external partner, knowing how to draft a legal document if you're, you know, if you've got legal skills or studying a kind of legal degree, knowing how to influence your partners to kind of get things that are mutually beneficial for both parties, knowing how to draft emails, knowing how to take phone calls. All of those things are really important, and it's not something that will ever be it will never just be specific to that role. It will always be something that will carry you for the rest of your career. So I think it's about kind of, like I said, looking at your local environment if you can, and finding things that you can do, whether it's a part-time internship, it's a bit of volunteering. I remember when I was doing my undergraduate degree, I had some friends that volunteered at a local food kitchen, and they would do kind of night shifts there a couple of times a week. So there's little things that you can do. It might not be, you know, a glamorous human rights internship
at the UN or something,
you know, a human rights firm in the UN or in a major city like New York, but it would definitely give you the skills that you need to then be able to pursue that maybe a year down the line or a year after you've graduated. You know, you kind of have to build yourself up. They're like building blocks, and the more that you can do while you're at university, the better, because honestly, you will never have more time than you have at university. It doesn't feel like it because it feels like you have lots of exams and lectures and seminars and all of that kind of stuff. But trust me, like when you actually start working, you have even less time. So definitely capitalize off of that time that you have, to kind of figure out what it is that you like, figure out what types of teams you like to work in. Like, are you a super collaborative person, or do you like to work a bit more independently? Do you like to work in big teams, or do you like to work in small teams? Would you prefer a really big organization or a smaller, more grassroots organizations? And you can kind of figure some of those things out while you're at university.
Yeah. Definitely. Personally, to you, what would you say your proudest achievement has been in your career?
My proudest achievement, I think I've got a couple. I'd probably say my most exciting experience, like in the kind of, I would still consider myself to be in the kind of early career stage. I've been working for about 4 years now. I think the most exciting experience I had was getting to travel. So one of the things I really wanted to do was travel for work. I just thought there's such a big world out there, and I would love to be able to travel for work. And when I started at DIT, so working on trade, I was able to go to Geneva and Iceland within my first year for work, which was incredible. And I hadn't traveled that much, so it meant a lot to be able to do that, not only to go to another country but also to do it for work. And working for your government and being able to represent your country is quite a big deal. So that was definitely one of my most exciting moments. I think one of my proudest moments would definitely be WIAN, so the Women in International Affairs Network. And I think the proudest moment was probably when we kicked off the first round of the mentorship program. And it was when I first started WIAN, it started off as a simple LinkedIn group. And I just posted as many kind of traineeships, internships, grad schemes, entry-level jobs that I could find. And over time, it became clear that actually it's not just early career women that are facing difficulties in navigating the sector. It continues well into your career, even when you've got 10 years of experience and you're looking for sponsorship or leadership positions, how to balance your career and your family, those kind of things that you might find kind of later on in your career. And I think the mentorship program, when it first started, it was a pilot scheme. We kind of had 50 mentees, 50 mentors, and we put them together for a year and just let them kind of get on with it. And now we're on the third year of the schemes. It's now an annual program. And just, sometimes reading some of the feedback that we get from the participants who feel like, this is something that they're so grateful to be a part of, that it's really kind of helped give them a bit more clarity on not just how to get into the sector more generally, but their unique path into the industry. And it's just always really heartwarming to see, not just from the mentees, but also for the mentors who were like, I wish that I had this when I started my career, however many years ago it was. So yeah, I think our mentorship scheme is probably my proudest achievement, and something that, really looking forward to seeing how it continues to evolve over the next, 5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah, definitely. It's a fantastic resource. I mean, to anybody listening, I would definitely recommend checking out the Women in International Affairs website. It's a fantastic jobs board, mentoring program, amazing content.
Thank you.
And finally for me, what would you suggest as your top 3 tips for anybody looking for a career in development related fields?
Top 3 things. Research is incredibly important. I think one of the issues with the development sector is that there is no one route in, which is one of the great things about the industry, but also one of the more difficult things. And that all experience is good experience and nobody has experience, and it's all very, very wild. So I would say research that ability to, even if you don't know the answer, to go and find it. And things like WIAN, and there are other organizations with similar mandates that look to support people pursuing careers here. We do our best, but the one thing that we can't teach you is how to research and be able to find the information for yourself. So I think that's something that's really important, and again will carry you for the whole of your career, not just at the beginning. So I think the ability to research and find information is really important. The second, I would say, is resilience, because you will find that, you'll make lots of applications. And, I always used to joke that when you get a rejection, it's better because at least you know that you haven't got the role.
Yeah.
A lot of organizations will not even get back to you, not because they don't want to, but for the sheer amount of applications, the volume of applications that they're probably getting. So it can be quite an unnerving and uncomfortable period, especially that transition from like graduate to if you decide not to go and do a master's. But even after you graduate from your master's, that period where you're kind of looking for a job and you know the types of roles that you want to do and you want to get into, but it just feels like you're always hitting a brick wall. Some people are really fortunate to get their first job as quickly as they graduate. Not everybody is that fortunate. So I think that resilience and taking each rejection or each silence as a learning lesson, requesting feedback as much as you can, because that will help. I've looked back at some of my early CVs and cover letters, and they're honestly laughable. But you have to start from somewhere. So definitely request feedback where you can. Try and send tailored, targeted applications for every role that you're applying for, and really just try and maintain a bit of a still gut for it, because it can be difficult. There are people that are looking for years after they graduate, and some people get it after a couple of months, some people get it after 18 months, some people 2-3 years are still kind of getting their foot into the industry. But yeah, remaining resilient and kind of always having at the back of your mind what it is that you want to achieve and what your goals are should really help. And the final thing, I would say, having an inquisitive mind, and I think it kind of feeds into the research bit that I spoke about earlier. I do think that it's the industry is an incredible one. Like, there's so much to do, so much to learn, so many incredible organizations doing really cool things. And I think if you take every bit of information in and really just like seek to explore it, I think it makes it a really exciting and almost, I say it tentatively, but like a fun journey. It can be tasking, it can be long, it can be hard, but it's a really exciting sector to work in. And I think if you keep your mind open, the possibilities are endless in my opinion. So yeah, I would say kind of research, resilience, and keeping an open and inquisitive mind. Those would be my top 3.
Like you say, being passionate about what you're doing, I think, is massively important. Otherwise, you work a lot of your day. You've got to enjoy what you're doing.
Exactly. And you will have days where you I don't want to say you'll hate your job, but there will be days where it's like, I really don't want to have to send this email, or I really don't want to take this meeting because I'm tired, I've got 1,000,001 other things to do. But when you're working in a field that you're passionate about, or an organization that you're passionate about what they're passionate about, it does make it all the more worthwhile. And I think I always say the development sector does not have any lack of passion, but it's about the skills to really do the work. So passion will definitely kind of drive you on the days where it doesn't feel quite so glamorous and exciting.
Yeah, definitely. Next we have a question from Dara, who is an MBA and MSc Strategic Studies graduate, and she's currently studying human rights. So she asked, what's the best way to enter the development field later in your career?
So I actually think that entering the sector a bit later on in your career, when you have some experience, is probably a bit better, because you have experience to kind of bank on and use to really provide evidence for the things that you're good at and the skills that you have. So I think it's about kind of keeping your ear to the ground to what opportunities are out there, but really kind of pulling out the transferable skills that you have already. Something that I learned quite early on was that you should, when it comes to like a CV or a cover letter, really framing what the kind of highlights of that role was. So if, for example, you were like a program coordinator in an international corporation, pull out like 2 or 3 of the key successes that you had in that role, and kind of let it kind of revolve around that, and really focus on the things that you did well in that role, because you have some evidence to show. It can be a bit more difficult for a recent graduate to do that. So where you're entering a little bit later and you have a bit of a employment history, that can really be helpful. I would also say kind of look at that there are so many kind of LinkedIn and Facebook groups where people are always posting relevant roles and jobs that you can apply for at any point in time. People are quite good at sharing opportunities that they come across. So that's one of another really good thing about the sector as well. And I think, you know, those groups can be a bit more informal, so people feel a bit more comfortable to share. So I would definitely plug into some of those, as well as job boards. I'll plug WIAN's job board here as well, but there are other job boards in the sector, also regional job boards depending on where you're based. So yeah, those are some of the things that I would do. Like I said, I still consider myself to be at that weird kind of early mid stage. So I don't think I have all the answers, but I think if you do those things, you hopefully should be able to find something that really suits you. Also, the fact that you're studying a postgraduate degree at the moment, you can definitely show that you've got the knowledge to back up making that kind of career transition or career change if that's what you're doing. But there will always be transferable skills that you can really pull out and that employers would really appreciate, because you've got that employment history and that evidence for the things that you're good at.
Oh yeah, making the most of that experience that you've already got, you know. Yeah.
Definitely.
Next we have a question from Molly, who is currently studying economics and global sustainable development at Warwick. And she asked, what inspired you to form the Women in International Affairs Network, and what were the hardships and biggest challenges in doing so?
Excellent question. So I could talk about WIAN forever, so do stop me if I ramble on. But yeah, so I started WIAN when I had just finished my master's degree, and you know, like I said, I had all this passion for international development and wanted to travel and do all of these great things at the UN or the World Bank or wherever.
Yeah.
It was going to be. And I really struggled for the first couple of months to find a job. I then had to do an unpaid internship, which fortunately was at the UN, but the fact that it was unpaid was quite difficult. But fortunately for me, I lived at home. I lived slightly out of the city, so I could kind of afford to travel in. So that was a really good experience for me. And the internship itself was really great. Like, it wasn't just your filing and printing and faxing and that kind of thing. We got to do some real interesting work, which was great. And then I started on a graduate scheme at the UK Government Department for Development. And once I started that, I got it was like an influx. It was like one day my LinkedIn message inbox was silent, and the next day it was like floods of messages from people about, you know, your career looks amazing. How did you intern at the UN? How did you get into DFID? And I remember being really taken aback at first, because I felt like, you know, it's great for me to have this opportunity, but at the same time, I'm still figuring it out as well. Like, I don't have all the answers. I only graduated about a year ago. So, you know, let me, you know, kind of figure it out for like a year and then I'll get back to you. But it was really nice to kind of talk to my peers, you know, women that were maybe a little bit younger than me, some women that were a bit older than me. And then it became really clear that there was a need to have a space for women to not only talk about the issues that they were facing, but to also have the solution, which, you know, WIAN is one of the things that's so fundamental to what we do, and not just providing that safe space for you to talk about the issues that you might face as a young woman, an older woman, a woman based in the global south or in Africa or wherever it may be, but also to then have the opportunities to back it up. So having access to those opportunities in the different sectors, being able to have the resources on, you know, where to go, what to do, how to draft things, how to draft CVs and cover letters and that kind of thing. That's equally as important as having a space to address the actual issues that you're facing. So through my conversations, through what I had experienced personally, kind of getting started in my development career, it just was, and I'd always kind of been passionate about women and kind of helping women. So that's always something that I had an affinity to do. So it just kind of made sense. And I always joke that WIAN found me rather than the other way around. And I think that's quite true for a lot of businesses and social enterprises out there, in that it almost creates itself and you're just almost like the channel for it to go through rather than the other way around. And you know, WIAN has taken different forms and it's definitely evolved over time. So like I said, when it first started out, it was simply a LinkedIn group, and then we piloted the first round of our mentorship scheme, and over time, over the 3.5 years that it's been running, it's really evolved to have programs, content, events, to really have a good offering to our membership network. I think one of the biggest challenges is balancing it with my full-time job, because I do work as well, and I'm equally trying to build my international career at the same time as trying to support others. So that can be quite difficult. And I think as well, because we're a voluntary organisation, it can be difficult sometimes to really, if we had full-time members of staff, you could do a lot more and reach a lot more people and have a much bigger impact. So one of the things that WIAN is focusing on is kind of looking for funding and ways to kind of build revenue so that our operations can kind of run themselves. But yeah, other than that, it's a joy to do. It's something that, like I said, I think it found me rather than the other way around. So I really enjoy doing it, and I have a great team of women all over the world who are equally as passionate about the vision as well. So yeah, definitely a good thing to do and a good thing to be a part of. And I definitely feel lucky to be a part of it. And yeah, really hope that it continues to reach people for the long term.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, definitely. And our last question comes from Alice, who is currently studying economics and politics. And following the challenges theme, she says, what are the most challenging parts of your role at DIT? And it might be quite handy just to give a little snapshot of kind of what you do on a daily basis.
Sure. So like you said, I work at the UK Department for International Trade. So I'm a trade policy advisor working on a number of policy areas within what we call sustainability. So that could be looking at climate change, the environment, labour, development and clean growth and those kind of issues. So a really, really interesting role. And part of my role is, so I work in a bilateral negotiations team. So part of my role is to negotiate free trade agreements with partner countries that will then kind of increase trade flows between the UK and whichever country that may be. So one of the most challenging things, and I would actually say the challenge started before I even began my first role, because I always considered myself like a development practitioner from the context of like humanitarianism. So in my graduate role at DFID, I was working on sub-Saharan Africa, which is very different to what I'm doing now. I'm kind of looking at it in the development context. And I always felt that because, I don't have a background in economics or business or anything like that. So I was actually really nervous to start. I'm not even really sure what made me apply. But I decided to apply. And my first role at DIT was working in a kind of country team. So I was working on some of the non-EU European countries like Norway and Iceland, Switzerland, which was really interesting. And yeah, it was definitely a huge learning curve, because trade is one of those things that, as a previous EU member, it was an EU competence. So all of our trade deals were negotiated by EU negotiators. They might have been like UK nationals, but it was all kind of done in Brussels. And now that we are an independent trading country, we are now developing that trade expertise for ourselves. And, I think it's one of the really exciting things, but definitely one of the things that scared me at first, because it was like, I know nothing about trade. I'm expected to, go into these trade negotiations, and I'm like, I graduated a couple of years ago and I'm not sure if I could do it. But I think as much as it was a learning curve, the resources were all there for you to really be able to research, learn. And I think honestly in the past, I think I've been working at DIT for about 2.5 years now, and the things that I have learned are things that I never would have thought I would have been doing. And this, I said earlier about how you will very likely find yourself in a role that you never imagined, but you will enjoy it a lot. I always thought I would be working on kind of humanitarian issues, international protection, and humanitarian affairs, but actually I've kind of found myself on the almost kind of trade, almost that kind of intersection between trade and development. And I think working on sustainability, so in my role now, like I said, I work on a number of sustainability issues. It's incredibly interesting. It's really exciting. Like I said, the UK is kind of developing as its own independent trading country, and with that is the opportunity to really do new and innovative things, learning new things all the time, not just internally and with my colleagues, but even with the partner countries that we're either negotiating with or collaborating with. There's just such a wealth of knowledge And I definitely think that my route, I definitely wouldn't have been able to, if you had told me 5 years ago that I would be working on trade and sustainability, I would have laughed at you. But I actually really, really enjoy it. It's been an incredible experience. And yeah, I think, so I think basically the biggest challenge was before I joined, and that kind of preconceived perception of what it would be like and how much, I just thought, I studied law, like I'm not an economist, I'm not an analyst, I have no idea about trade flows and all that kind of thing. But actually it's been an incredible learning experience, and I've learned a hell of a lot over the past 2.5 years, and really enjoy it. It's probably my favorite job that I've ever had so far. So yeah.
I think that's, you're so right, because development isn't just that kind of traditional, it's one of those myths, I think, a lot of people think just being in kind of a country somewhere in disaster relief, whereas there's so many more you can contribute to kind of develop a different country. And trade is one of those ones. It's kind of more, I feel like it's more sustainable as well. If you have a decent trade, it can last a while.
Definitely, and it can support a lot of, that's one of the things about trade, is that it can support a lot of what a country is already doing. So you wouldn't think that a free trade agreement would consider, before I joined DIT, I definitely wouldn't have thought that. I didn't even know what a free trade agreement was, to be honest, let alone a free trade agreement that considers some of these sustainability and development issues. But it's at the intersection of so many things. So like I said, I work on sustainability, but there are other parts of an FTA looking at, goods, services, intellectual property, digital, so many things. And an FTA is just one lever of trade policy. There are so many other forums within a kind of trade policy package, I guess. So yeah, it's an incredibly exciting industry to be in. It's an incredibly exciting time to be at DIT as well. And I would definitely encourage, anybody who's either listening to this or part of your network to look at roles in not just DIT, but if you're in another part of the world, look at your local government. There are also kind of private sector organizations that are always looking for like trade policy knowledge and trade consultants. And it might not be trade policy, it could be like exports and imports, it could be anything. To definitely look into it. And I know that DIT is always recruiting. So the more the merrier.
Definitely. It's about that community, I guess. So and thank you for sharing your fantastic answers and expertise with our community, and WIDS will be really grateful to have your expertise. So thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
I would definitely recommend everybody follow the WIDS social media and keep up to date with our new careers profiles. I think next up we have an inspirational woman who's founded Beyond CSR, which is an analysis-based, impact-driven sustainability organisation, which is coming in the next few weeks. I would definitely recommend keeping in touch with us to check that out. Also, like WIAN on Facebook, subscribe to their email newsletter. It's great. Every so often you get an email saying jobs in development, and I know personally for me, I'm like, oh, this is so exciting.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, we have the fortnightly jobs thread that we kind of send a couple of roles directly to your inbox. So yeah, a definitely useful resource.
Definitely. So thank you very much, Demi, and thank you all for listening.